My name is Peggy Kurtz. Welcome to this program, which is program presented by Rockland Sierra Club and Roar. Roar is, let me just make sure I read it correctly, stands for Religious Orders Along the River. And Sister Carol will be speaking about that connection a little bit more in a few minutes. For me, this is one in a series of programs I hoped that we can do this year. I also should say Rockland Sierra Club is part of the larger group, which is Lower Hudson Group of Sierra Club, which also meets monthly. This is one in a series of programs I hope to do this year on the very serious issue of the crisis of biodiversity and species extinctions. Very serious crisis that unfortunately not that many people are aware of. As environmentalists, we spend a great deal of time fighting the wrong things, fossil fuel pipelines and desalination proposals, etc. But it's also important to put out our vision for a better way. And that's what this program is all about. The movement for the rights of nature is a way to legally protect ecosystems. But I see it also as a cultural shift, to see nature not just as resources that human beings can use, but rather as having an inherent right not only to be, but also to thrive. Beloved environmental writer Aldo Leopold wrote in 1927 in a beautiful little essay that's called, what's it called again? It's called the environmental ethic, the land ethic it's called, about an evolution in our ethics over time and the necessity to expand our moral circle beyond human beings to what he called land, meaning land, animals, and plants. And he wrote that that ethic depends on our seeing ourselves as part of a larger community that includes what he called land, and that implies respect for the integrity of that community, for itself, and an obligation on our part to help it thrive. Today, he wrote that essay in 1927. Today, almost 100 years later, that evolution in ethics, that essay is so prescient. And that evolution in ethics is needed more urgently than ever. And that's why I think this program is so important. The rights of nature is a way of helping us shift our perspective in a way that is so urgently needed. So now it's my pleasure to introduce Sister Carol. Sister Carol is a member of the Sisters of Charity of New York, and she is also their director of the Office of Peace, Justice, and Integrity of Creation, and a member of Roar, which is Religious Orders Along the River. Sister Carol?
Thanks. Thank you, Peggy. And it's really great. I just want to thank Peggy and Rockland Group for letting us co-sponsor this conversation with Tish, with you. So I did think it would be helpful if I just say a few words about Roar. And just a slight correction is religious organizations. Okay, religious organizations.
Sorry.
No, that's fine. So Roar is actually going to celebrate its 30th anniversary in 2 years. It's hard to believe that. And we're a network of about 12 religious congregations of vowed men and women who believe that we share kinship with all creation, and that humans, the water, the air, the land, and our common home, Earth, form a single sacred community. So I'm giving you some background on this so that it might give you an idea of how we got involved with this rights of nature movement. So Pope Francis in 2015 wrote this Laudato Si letter to all peoples on the earth, and he reaffirmed what we had been working on since our very beginning in 1996, that we are part of nature, not separate from it. And several years ago, John Lipscomb, who is patrol boat and advocate for Riverkeeper, he asked Roar members to see, and I have see in quotes here, because he asked us to see in a new way the Hudson River from the rights of nature movement. And as we learned more about this, our perspective did shift. While we continue to work with our environmental colleagues and you, all right, many of whom are on this Zoom, on environmental injustice and address issues such as PCBs, closure of Indian Point, PFASs, and no new fossil fuel infrastructure, we knew we needed to practice integral ecology. That's a term that's become much more used since the encyclical came out. And it's a way of thinking, doing, and being that sees everything as connected and interrelated. So as we address issues now as ROAR members, we try to see the river's perspective, and even more broadly, from an ecosystem perspective, while we see ourselves, where we see ourselves as part of a larger whole. So I'd like to mention here Laudato Si, just a few phrases from Laudato, one longer paragraph from Laudato Si, and three from Laudate Deum, which is a more recent letter from the Pope that was came out in October. And he actually wrote that letter because he's really concerned people are not responding to the climate crises. And he was very concerned about the expectations and what was going to happen in COP28 in Dubai. So I just highlight this for you because this gives you an idea of why ROAR is kind of working out of this philosophy, out of this viewpoint and perspective. What is being asked of us is nothing other than a certain responsibility for the legacy we will leave behind once we pass from this world. What is the legacy that we will leave behind? Human beings must be recognized as part of nature. Human life, intelligence, and freedom are elements of the nature that enriches our planet, part of its internal working and its equilibrium. And that causes us to challenge ourselves. How are we using our life, our intelligence, our freedom for the good of the whole? We need to rethink, among other things, the question of human power, its meaning and its limits. And there's a lot on human power and how it's used in that Laudate Deum letter. But I'm going to end with this from Laudato Si. Nature cannot be regarded as something separate from ourselves or as a mere setting in which we live. We are part of nature, included in it, and thus in constant interaction with it. Recognizing the reasons why a given area is polluted requires a study of the workings of society, its economy, its behavior patterns, and the ways it grasps reality. That could, we could spend a long time saying, what does that mean to us? But I offer this to say, this is why we really, as ROAR, have said we want to really spend some time learning about how the rights of nature can impact our love of the Hudson, our bio region, our system, ecosystem here. And that's how we came to know Tish Odell. And so I have the honor of introducing you, Tish. So we're going to shift now because this is really about Tish sharing her expertise. So Tish is the consulting director at CELDIF, Community Education Legal Defense Fund. And I'm going to give you some highlights that I got from the website. Do that first to give you a flavor of her rich experiences. She's a CELDIF Democracy School lecturer and a founding member and current board member of the Ohio Community Rights Network. For 10 years now, she has been involved in community rights and rights of nature work, starting in her own community at Broadview Heights, Ohio, which led to the adoption of Ohio's first Home Rule Charter Amendment, creating a community bill of rights, banning fracking, and recognizing rights of nature. She's worked with dozens of Ohio communities on anti-fracking, anti-pipeline, right to a livable climate, fair and free elections and water privatization issues. And she works with communities all over the country and internationally, and most recently assisted the people of Toledo with their effort to pass the historic Lake Erie Bill of Rights, the first law on United States settler colonial land to recognize the rights of a specific ecosystem. And these above facts tell us about Tish's professional work. What they don't convey is Tish's gift of bringing people together, people who have a passion and commitment to care for each other and the land on which they live. Tish has a vision of a healthy, sustainable, life-giving ecosystem of which we are a part. Her perseverance, openness, and insights have helped to bring people together to work towards that vision. And I saw this happen when I was privileged at her invitation to join in October a Truth, Reckoning, and Right Relationship Conference. That was part one. And just a few weeks ago, she had part two, which I wasn't able to attend, but I heard it was very successful. So Tish, we welcome you and look forward to hearing your insights and your wisdom. Thanks a lot, Tish.
Oh my gosh. Between you and Peggy, I'm like, I feel like so hopeful because I'm like, I feel like you've got it. You summed it up beautifully. I don't even have to talk. You guys are great. And I can tell you just a few years ago, people would not have like introduced it that way, rights of nature. And so to me, I mean, I'm in this all the time. And I can tell you that this is really awe-inspiring to me because it means that there's an evolution taking place already, and that's what's so awesome about all of this, that you've started evolving in your thinking. And so it's working. The plants the seeds we planted are starting to sprout. So that's great. I love, that term integral ecology and that idea that we're part of nature, not separated from it. And that we need to think about issues and projects from the river's perspective. I can tell you no one would have said that probably even a year or a year and a half ago in an introduction. So thank you. Thanks for inviting me. Again, that perspective, it's not what we're taught or raised to think about, let alone believe in. And I too had to go through my own evolution in my own thinking to get to this place where I am today. So I thought really quickly, I know we've been talking about with Indigenous people and others that people learn a lot through storytelling. And so I thought I would just tell the quick short story of who I am and how I evolved to be this rights of nature advocate. And according to Carol, some expert. And maybe, some of this will resonate with you and your story and your journey as well. But I was born and raised in the Cleveland area. My dad also, he had immigrant parents and he was raised in the Cleveland area. And then I raised my son in the same community I was raised in. And the only reason I say that is because I have a real connection to place. And I think that's really important. And it's a part of, I think, this evolution that has to happen, because I started thinking about it before doing traditional environmental activism. We want to get people engaged and we want to seem like we get and get people angry about what's happening and getting them in the streets. And then it dawned on me, well, if people don't feel that sense of connection to nature and to the place, how do we expect them to get that emotional and want to get into the streets or take risks or do what they have to do in order to protect it? In 2010, what happened, it was life-altering for me. I attended a council meeting and there was new people moving in the community, and it was urban drilling and fracking. And my community is very residential, but they were doing this in people's backyards and neighborhoods. They were doing it next to schools, next to churches, next to City Hall. So I did what most people do. I started educating myself on what this was. I didn't have a lot of information on the process. And of course, the more I researched, the more I opposed it. But I went to first my local electeds and said, here's what I've learned. Help us stop this. And of course, they said, no, we can't help you. And they said, go to the state elected. So went to the state electeds. They said, go to the EPA. So then I went to the EPA and they said, oh no, you got to go to the health department. So then we realized, we were getting the runaround here. I even went to Sherrod Brown, who is our federal elected representative, but no one at all would help. They all just said the same kind of things. They all muttered under their breath, well, it's bringing jobs. Jobs are what's important. That's the most important thing. So then what I did in 2011, I ran for mayor because I figured I would stop it myself, believing in this, great democracy we have, and I'll fix it. Well, I lost the election, but I learned a whole lot, and I had walked all the neighborhoods. And so I learned and met a lot of community members that I didn't know and talked to all these people, and we formed bonds, building community. So in 2012, I worked with CELDEF because during my mayoral race, that's when I learned about CELDEF. I didn't know what they were, that they were a nonprofit public interest law firm. And they helped us draft this law for our community, which not only would prohibit oil and gas drilling, but it had the first rights of nature language in it. And that's how I became aware of rights of nature for the state of Ohio. Put it on a ballot and the people passed it, and we thought, yay, we won. But then in 2013, 2 drillers sued the city to have the law overturned because they found it very threatening. At that point, CELDEF helped us, the residents. We filed a class action lawsuit against the state, against the governor, against the EPA, the Ohio Department of Natural Resources, for violating our rights to clean air, water, and soil. And also that year, I was sued for $1 million for speaking out against a de-icer that contained high levels of radiation. And through all this, I wasn't making the connection yet that what we do to nature, we do to ourselves. I still believed, in the system that I was taught about, regulating the harms, and that somehow, the laws will protect everything. But it was around that time that I heard an indigenous speaker in Oberlin, his name is Sundance. And he said to the group at that time, he said, what you do to me, you do to yourselves. And honestly, at that time in 2013, I didn't understand exactly what he meant. I mean, I do now, obviously, and thankfully we've become good friends and he's continued to share with me, but I didn't. In 2013, I was hired as an organizer, part-time organizer by CELDEF. And as Carol said, I spent the next several years working with other communities. We had over 40 attempts in Ohio to put rights of nature laws on the ballot across the state. And what I learned then firsthand was the more pressure the people put on the system to change it by proposing all these laws, is that the system was going to push back and get more aggressive to stop it. Then in 2019, we'll jump ahead, that the Lake Erie Bill of Rights was put on a ballot. And that was a fight all in itself. That's a different story for a different time. But when it went on the ballot and it passed, it got a ton of media attention. I mean, we didn't expect any of this. We had the Daily Show come and they did a segment. Le Monde from France covered it, the UK, a paper in Italy, India. It became a Clue on Jeopardy, the game show. And locally, though, we weren't getting all that much coverage, but it was getting all this national and international attention. Well, what happened is just 12 hours after it passed on the ballot, a federal lawsuit was filed to have it overturned. So that quickly. Our state, within 2 months, they inserted sneakily into our budget bill a preemption language, which we found out later was written by the Ohio Chamber of Commerce, and it closed the courts to rights of nature. And it said no other community in Ohio, the people could represent nature in a court in Ohio. So all this is happening and it seems really horrible and awful, right? Like, this is bad, this isn't gonna work. And at the same time, that same year, 2019, I got an email from an art museum in Cleveland, the Contemporary Museum of Art. And they said this artist, this LA-based activist artist who's internationally known, is fascinated with rights of nature and wants to cover the Lake Erie Bill of Rights. And so I was like, my first reaction at the time was, what in the hell does art have to do with law? We work for a law firm, and what does this have to do with art? So again, still not connecting and still evolving this whole time. Then in 2020 is when the Lake Erie Bill of Rights actually went to federal court. And it was the first time ever in this country that the rights of an ecosystem were argued in federal court for over 45 minutes. Now, the judge ruled on the wrong side, of course. He ruled on the side of the big corporate entity and not on the side of Lake Erie. And he was on the wrong side of history, which I think, you know, so many of the judges that we know from history, when we review them later, you know, decades later, it's like we know they're on the wrong side of history. But even though this court and this judge overturned the Lake Erie Bill of Rights, you know, opting in favor of the corporate rights, a New York state legislator, Patrick Burke, contacted CELDF. And he said, you know what? I've been following the Lake Erie Bill of Rights, but I don't think that's enough anymore. Now I think because all the Great Lakes are connected and interconnected, it's not enough to protect one lake. We need to protect them all. I was like, wow. He's like, can you help us draft a Great Lakes Bill of Rights? So, you know, my lesson, I guess, here and that I learned and hoping I'm sharing with all of you is that even though this court ruled against rights of nature and Lake Erie, we still had this artist who was fascinated, wanted to create a whole exhibit around it. We had a New York legislator, state legislator, who wanted to introduce a bill about it. And we also had another Ohio community, Cincinnati, that even though they knew all this stuff, they still wanted us to help them draft an Ohio River Bill of Rights. So I could really feel like this shift happening. And of course, in 2020, then of course, COVID shut down the museum. So yet another obstacle thrown in the way. But it gave us more time to reflect and evolve. So I thought I would just really quickly at this point, Peggy, I will share my screen and put up a few slides so you don't have to just look at my talking head the whole time. Let's see here. Can you all see that?
Yes, we can. Yes.
Okay, great. Okay. So the first question, you know, and it's pretty, I think we've covered some of it, but people still, they'll say, what are the rights of nature? And so this is just a definition that we put together, you know, pretty simple. It means securing the highest legal protections and the highest societal value for nature through the recognition of nature's rights and associated human rights. So again, it's not an either or, it's both together. We can't, like as Sister Carol said and Peggy mentioned, we can't separate this. Rights of Nature is a new legal framework rooted in indigenous knowledge and also a new scientific understanding of our interconnectedness with nature. Again, we've talked to humans are part of nature, not above it. We're not here to manage it completely and, you know, oversee it. Rights of Nature seeks responsibility and stewardship, not ownership. And that's part of the problem with our current legal system. In our legal system, property is seen as something to be owned. So it's invisible under the law as far as rights are concerned. Nature has a right to exist, flourish, and thrive in its own right, not dependent on human rights and on human economic gains. And so an example of this is like, we worked with some people in Florida and, you know, there's a bill, they were calling it right to clean water. And we've seen this in a lot of communities where they'll say, well, we have a right as the humans to clean water. That's true, but we have to then ask the next question. Does our right, why do you want the right to clean water? And if it's for economic reasons, does the lake or the river or whatever, will that activity help the lake and its ecosystem or the river and its ecosystem? So for example, in Florida, they wanted the right to clean water because they said dirty water is going to harm tourism and it's going to harm development going on, people wanting to buy homes down there and build homes down there. Well, that's fine for human economic gains, but those things, will that help the ecosystem and the other life within the waterways down there? So that's what we're kind of talking about. So when Sister Carol, you said about seeing it through the perspective of, you know, the river, that's what we kind of need to do. And it's something we haven't been taught to do. Rights of nature also gives legal standing to nature and provides residents living within the ecosystem and watershed with a legal tool to not only hold polluters accountable once they've done harm, but to object to the harm before it happens, which is also really important and not something we really have. We do have things like the regulatory system currently where people can go, you know, to a hearing and maybe voice their opinion that they think this project may harm the community, the ecosystem, whatever, but they don't have to do anything with your comments. There's no enforceability there. So we're talking about a movement, not just a moment, that our laws should be a reflection of our values. And so when those values change, our laws change. See, for a long time at CELDF, 25 years of this, we thought that if we had enough communities pass these laws, that would change culture, right? That people's values would shift. And unfortunately, that didn't seem to be the case. Now we're kind of thinking, after we've had like this art project and got to reflect on some of this, that we maybe need a bigger, broader, you know, change in values of the society at large. And a lot of people, when you get things in court, in the legal system, they stop paying attention. They tune out for a couple of reasons. One, they think it's too complicated and I don't understand it. And two, they think, well, the lawyers will handle it now, right? I don't have to pay attention because it's there, it's in the courts. So that's why we've kind of are shifting a bit in our, you know, our I guess our activism, whatever you want to call it, and our strategies and our tactics. Change, we know, is born from confrontation. Social movements through history have been won over decades, not just one election, one initiative, one moment, but and Peggy, you mentioned that in your introduction, right? We a lot of times spend all this time on one chemical, on one project coming, and that's all great. I mean, I think that's good. We still need that resistance. I'm not saying we shouldn't be doing that, but we need more than that, because none of that is attacking the underlying system and structure that is actually causing these problems. And it can't just be about regulating harms and bad behavior, as we said. So like in Toledo, for example, they had a huge in Lake Erie algae bloom that shut their water down. And so this idea that, you know, if we just, the community or the system's answer was, we'll just add more chlorine to the water. We'll upgrade your water treatment plant and that'll fix it. We also can't just be worried about human economics, right? And our economic system. Not that economics isn't important, but it can't be the main number one all the time, the only thing we consider. In Cleveland, this was just obviously last month with the eclipse, but this was on a headline from the paper here, you know, talking about because the eclipse that it was going to be this great economic windfall for us here. I was like, oh boy. Good example of the economics being the number one front and center. And it can't just be about creating awareness. So again, some people mishear me sometimes, but I'm not saying awareness isn't important. It is important, but it has to be about more than that. Because here's this photo. This is from about 1960. And you can see, you know, what it's saying. Pollution's a shame, save Lake Erie. Nothing's really changed. People are still putting that up, but it's different issues. Back then it was the oil refineries and the petroleum and maybe the phosphorus. Today it's forever chemicals, PCBs, radioactivity in the water. So it's just that the harms and pollution's changed, but the system hasn't changed. And again, there's your Aldo Leopold quote, Peggy. So see, I really love his quote when he says, we abuse land because we regard it as a commodity belonging to us. And when we see land as a community to which we belong, we may begin to use it with love and respect. And we have to look at this is a community too. So even though there's not a human in sight, that is still a community because there's a lot of life in that community. So is this. You might recognize that picture. The Hudson Valley. Yeah, sure, there's humans within that ecosystem, but there's a lot of other life too. So as Sister Carol mentioned, you know, we decided in a lot of this reflection, that we needed something new. We needed something different. I don't know. It was like, this idea of, we worked so long on securing the highest legal protections for nature, but now we needed to focus more on that highest societal value that we talked about. And, we'd seen over the 25 years we've been doing the work, and we'd worked in lots of states, including New Hampshire, Washington, Oregon, Colorado, Pennsylvania, Florida, New Mexico, that the legal system, shut down rights of nature when we tried it in all these places because they saw it as such a threat. So, back to the idea that when the art museum contacted me and I said, what does art have to do with law? That maybe we needed to also think outside the box, right, on how policies and laws shift. And that this might entail the cultural shift, like I said, which is much broader. I mean, I feel sometimes like we're in a relationship crisis with our community and our neighbors, with elected officials, with other countries, and really most importantly with nature. So as Sister Carol mentioned, we decided to do this truth reckoning and right relationship. And this was a big push, and I have to thank MoCA, the Museum of Contemporary Art Cleveland, and Andrea Bowers for her work. I mean, just to give you an idea, this is a huge neon she made. Lake Erie has the right to exist, flourish, and naturally evolve. And this is actually on the back facing Lake Erie of the Great Lakes Science Center. And it's been up for a while now, and it's going to stay up throughout the summer and the fall. And we're hoping it'll get to be a permanent sculpture within the city. But it's so interesting to watch people. This will become very crowded, this area in the summer, and to just see what people think, right? And the conversations that might start, like, what does that mean? This is one that's at the museum, and this is also staying up even after the exhibit closes May 26th. But this is a tribute to the Great Lakes Bill of Rights. And this is language from that bill. And this is huge. You can see the person on the right there, how small, so you can get it as to scale, the size of that. And the not to be owned, privatized, or monetized is lit up at night. And so you can see it through the museum. And this is a very busy place in the city as well. So, this idea of shifting and thinking like, well, how many people are going to see this and cause them to think differently? So that then maybe when the laws, right, get proposed or things that they'll now have a connection to what that means. As Sister Carol mentioned, the first part was a truth and reckoning that she came to. And this idea that we have to be completely honest, which I'm not sure we've been with ourselves, right? And Sister Carol was very courageous to share her truths with everyone in the room. And there's recordings of these testimonies, the people who came, because they came from all areas of our culture. So we had a medical doctor there. We had academic. We had someone, you'll see that, I think the next one, yeah, this one, she worked for the EPA for over 20 years. And this is a quote from her testimony, and being completely honest that even though for 20 years of my career, I worked for the Environmental Protection Agency, I realize now, and I'm honest enough to say, it's not working. It's not preventing real environmental protection. And that takes guts, that takes courage to do. We had, like I said, a medical doctor there. He brought a different perspective. We had young people there. We had community members there. We had a journalist. And so it was this idea of starting from a place of truth and honesty instead of starting at a place where we do now, where we go, well, this is the system and what's the best we can get in it, right? What's the best? And we usually, so we're starting from a place of like trying to figure out ways to manipulate, and we can't because it's a fixed system. That's kind of what we've realized. I think the positive news, though, is again that the rights of nature movement has been growing steadily over the last 25 years. And even if as I mentioned at the beginning, just Peggy, you and Carol, you know, what you said, this is moving quickly. And the good thing is we have a lot of technology and media things. Sometimes the media is not always great, but we do have the ability to share information more quickly with people. And so I think that's causing, plus I think people are understanding what's going on with nature and our ecosystems and our environment. And we're seeing that there's this connection. So there's a lot of doctors, this Zach Bush, MD, I don't know if you've heard of him, but he made the connection, right? That it's interesting when we started this industrial agriculture, that it's the same time coincided with the explosion of chronic disease, ecosystem collapse, and biodiversity loss. And this is another doctor, an MD. She works in California at a hospital. And she wrote this book, Inflamed. And she's talking about, you know, connecting how as the world burns, you know, our inflammation in our body is, you know, things burn, not in order, not being, you know, working together. Something's not, you know, in jiving with each other. Something's causing this inflammation. And so it's interesting that, you know, she talks about that as we're shredding the relationships between organisms and places, that it's affecting our bodies as well. So all these things, you know, are really, I think, part of what we need to do. And talking to each other, that's what I want to also say to all of you. It's interesting because the system will tell us that we have to go to court. We have to have mass marches in the street. But what really threatened them the most in Ohio and the other places where we worked is when we joined together as community, trying to get these laws passed. That's what they want to stop. They don't like us talking to each other. And so they diminish when we try to do that, right? When we try to talk to our neighbors, when we try to have conversations, and when, especially when we focus on what we have in common, which is the need and desire for healthy, sustainable communities, for clean water, for clean air. They try to throw in this divide and conquer of other issues, right, to divide us. Not that we're not going to have, you know, different opinions on some of these issues, but if we start from a place of what we have in common, I think we can build relationship. That's the point of the right relationship. The event we had in April, it was 2 days. We brought people together again from all different walks of life, different places, but along the Great Lakes. And it was interesting, the relationships people formed even within the 2 days. And they want to stay in contact with each other. That is a threat. So again, you know, this idea, how can we build sustainable communities if we can't stop unsustainable activities, I think is important. And I want to throw out some questions, I guess, to you guys, and then see if we can have a little conversation about that. So does the law change culture, or do cultural shifts change the law? I mean, I'd like to get your perspectives on that. I'd also like to know, you know, if an ecosystem, I guess by you, maybe it could be water, maybe it could just be a forest, something else, but what is your relationship? And do you think you're in right relationship with that ecosystem? I mean, I'm curious if people will be honest and be open, I guess, about those things. And then another thing, maybe if we want to talk about, is what changes would need to happen culturally, legally, and economically to, you know, significantly and meaningfully protect, like the Hudson River Valley or nature, and allow them to flourish and thrive. So I'm curious what ideas all of you have on those questions and topics. So I'm going to stop sharing and open it up to all of you. You can either ask me a question, or if you want to, like, I think, open up and talk about one of those prompts or something else, I think that would be great.
So I just want to suggest you can either just raise your hand, or I suppose you could right now, you could just speak out, and you can put a question in the chat if you have a question. Anne, you have to unmute. Yeah.
Hi, Tish. I don't know if you remember, but in 2019, you presented for the Atlantic chapter of the Sierra Club, at the Cornell Environmental Law Society via video about the Lake Erie Bill of Rights, and it was so exciting because it was before it got all squashed. So it was good to see your name, and I had to go back and where was she? And I found you in the program. So anyway, my question is how, because I have some friends and colleagues who have been, were, at least I think it's been kind of squashed as well, involved in the idea of the commons. And does this whole thing tie in with the commons, the idea of commons property, that there's property that's owned by everyone and not by any particular person, that's in particular nature? Have you come across that, or are you dealing with that idea at all? Or
Yeah. Yeah, and it's interesting. I mean, there's some similar, things that I think are good about that. And then there's also some issues and problems with it as well. Because one, it's still viewing nature as property. And then the other thing
yeah.
is, and then the other thing, because that it ties into our current system, right? It's like always who gets to decide. So see, like with the rights of nature, the way we propose it is like people who live within that ecosystem should have the ability to bring, have standing to speak about the ecosystem because it affects them directly. So the problem with a lot of these commons and conservancies is they have a board, and sometimes again it's people who don't even live there, right? So I'm not going to say anything, it's not a generality like they're all bad or they're all good, but they do have issues and problems, and so we have to look closely at how everything is set up, right, and how it's going to work.
Yeah, that was the thought I had as I was framing their question in my mind. I'm going, but they're still seeing it as property. So thank you.
Yeah. I mean, even some of the conservancies that are set up that they have, and the problem is then we've seen them, they're leasing the property for drilling or whatever, because they go, oh, it'll help us raise money to then buy more land. Like, and this makes sense to some people. We're going to harm this land here so we can get revenue to then buy more land. And I'm like,
Yeah, that's a big problem with the conservancy. The Nature Conservancy in particular are notorious for that. So I guess I shouldn't have mentioned a name, but there it is.
Well, I mean, it's for people to look at. And again, I think everybody probably starts out with good intentions, right? And it's like, and then as you try to work within this system, you realize that, wait a minute, it's again that if you put a few people in charge to have the decision-making power, who has the authority, that's where we get into trouble a lot, I think.
Yeah.
Alan, you had your...
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, let me thank you first off. It's wonderful work that you're doing, and I think it is a huge shift for a lot of people to even open their minds to this kind of thing. I've been part of what's called eco-psychology, and the eco-psychology movement has been trying to bridge people involved in mental health, psychotherapy, with the awareness that we're not separate from nature, that our mental health problems very often result from our alienation from nature, and that by being more connected to nature, you often can find it helps you with your anxiety or problems like depression. Have you explored at all I know you're interested in indigenous wisdom, as you said, that indigenous people use rituals and ceremonies in order to help people, even people who believe these kinds of ideas sometimes have a hard time actually experiencing it enough to move them to do what needs to be done. I know Lori, who's here, has been very involved with Joanna Macy, and her work is, very powerful in helping people to make that shift, not just to understand the ideas of things like nature having rights, but to experience nature as part of our living family.
Mm-hmm. Yes, and Sundance, who I mentioned, he does every month, he does a new moon ceremony. And so I go to that ceremony every month. And having read obviously pieces and talked to other Indigenous people. We did have at the Truth and Reckoning, the Right Relationship, we had 2 women from the Walpole Island Nation, and they did a breakout session on ceremony, which was really interesting. And this idea, and for me, I started just by like, and you just showed how colonized I am and propagandized into this way of thinking that we're separate from nature. And so it was just, I started by going out and like talking to the birds outside, and at first it felt so awkward, like I was like, oh my God, my neighbors are going to think I'm crazy, right? Like I'm out here talking to the birds, but it just gets easier. It's funny, the more you do it. And then every time I would go down to Lake Erie, I mean, I go to Lake Erie to feel better. Like when I'm feeling anxious and that I go, and she's just so awesome. And yeah, I started talking to her, and it's really interesting how just the more you do it, because we aren't taught to look at nature as a relative, as kin at all. But yeah, I do believe in that. And I think it's something we can all do. And I think the more we do it, it's really just to tell you a quick story to show how separated even some young people are. I went and talked to a class because of the art show at Case Western Reserve University, and there was about 40 students in there. And I had them do some exercises like I just asked you with some of the questions and prompts about, and I used Lake Erie. I said, you guys are here by Lake Erie. I said, what's your connection to Lake Erie? And are you in good relationship? Well, one of the kids, and then they had to share, and one of the young men stood up and he said, I was born in this area, in this, Northeast Ohio. I've been raised here, and I have absolutely no relationship to Lake Erie. None. And I said, really? I go, you have no relationship at all? And he goes, nope. I don't never go to her, don't see her, don't, nothing. I go, I think you're mistaken. I said, I think you have a very intimate relationship with Lake Erie. And again, the class is like looking, and the teacher even was like, what? And I said, you do drink water, don't you? And he's like, yes. And I go, are you only drinking water from somewhere else? Or you drink? He goes, no. I go, well, you're 60, 70% water. I go, Lake Erie's running through your veins. And you could just see the shift. Like,
Yeah,
and
that's
I
beautiful.
thought, wow. Yeah, they're not even making this connection, right? It's that idea. I remember being in elementary schools, and kids, they'd ask little kids, about milk. Where does milk come from? And they'd go from, Kroger's or Giant, the grocery store. And I'm thinking now it's with water. People young, and young and old, even the older people in the room, the professor didn't make that connection. So I'm like, we just think it comes from the faucet, right? Or out of that plastic bottle, or wherever you're drinking water from, that we're not connecting it to the source. So I think that's a real basic thing we can do to help people connect.
George, and then Lori, I'm wondering if maybe afterwards you want to say a few words also, because we were talking, Tish was talking about art, and I thought maybe that would be something that would resonate for you. George?
Tish, it's a wonderful presentation. Has something like what you proposed passed anywhere in the United States?
Yeah, they've passed. We've had lots of them passed, and some have not been challenged. So for example, we had the very first law in the world passed in the United States. It was Tamaqua Borough, Pennsylvania, small red community, southeastern Pennsylvania. That was passed in 2006, and it's never been challenged. So it's still on the books. That's the other problem with laws, right? Like if they're never put to use and never tried to be used, or anything, that also doesn't really help. But after what happened, that was passed in 2006, and most people don't even know that. Everybody points to Ecuador. Ecuador saw what happened in Tamaqua Borough, Pennsylvania, 2 years later in 2008, and they were rewriting their constitution and asked CELDF to help draft the language to put into the Ecuadorian constitution. And now that law, because it's in their federal, national constitution, that's been used several times since 2008. And there's now cases finally coming out that they're ruling in favor of nature and stopping projects, mining projects and things. So on our website, if you're interested, we helped translate, because they were obviously in Spanish. So we translated like the Los Cedros cloud forest case, and then there was 2 other cases, but we have the English translations on our website.
Great.
That's awesome. Lori, did you want to say anything? or ask questions. You don't have
I
to.
really actually was feeling quiet, like maybe not to for a change. But as you're asked, what's coming to my mind, a couple things. I love the question of, which way does it go to create the legal framework, to change culture, or to change the culture, to influence the legal framework. I have worked here very closely with PEG for many years. I don't know, 14 years, PEG. And but I have danced around this circle from every direction, working directly on informing electeds and officials. Sometimes it works, sometimes it hasn't. I think influencing legislation is extremely effective to changing people when you can accomplish it. I just heard just an hour ago, I was listening to someone in a video. I don't know if he currently is, but it's the director of the Central Park Conservancy. It's a little related. And someone said, do people like clean up their own garbage in the park? And he said, well, I'll tell you, when we do a good job of cleaning up the park, they do a good job of cleaning up the park. And I find that with perspective and beliefs around our environment, people do follow laws more. And with art, I've been in the art world as a curator in New York City. I'm very influenced by the early years of the eco art movement. Really, I was part of it. But I always felt that stayed a little upper echelon-y. I'm not sure it reached all the people widespread, but it does trickle down a lot of the upper end art. But then just to share for anybody here who wonders about, like, I have taken that and worked with the next generation. I do programs now for kids. I gave up my art career and turned my work into creating art programs, environmental art programs for children, to put the earth in their hands and to have dialogue with them. Natural, kind of the way we all wish we had been raised up. We don't have native teachings to talk to the streams and the trees, but we do with our kids and our programs. And the art is like a gateway. I was telling it yesterday at the Maker Fair here. Art is like a gateway for them to open. And when people are open, there's more chance for learning or change. So I think art is very effective when it's community art. I think
agree
that's
with
a
you.
lot of
Yeah.
thoughts all at once, but thank you for asking, Peg.
Yeah, and I applaud you for doing, because I think that's true. The young people, especially, they need to feel that connection, because again, it comes back to that wanting to protect it. If you're connected to it, like, how are you gonna fight for something if you're not even connected to it? That makes no sense. So no, I applaud. And I didn't mean I don't think there's any answer, right? Like, right
No,
or
I
wrong.
like the
think,
question is what I
yeah,
meant.
yeah,
It is a
it's
good
both.
question to live
Right,
with.
it's both, but to get people to think about it, and I always think about the Martin Luther King when he wrote that letter from Birmingham jail, I believe that's what it was in, and he said, a law can keep you from killing me. It can't make you love me, but it can keep you from killing me, right? So it's like, it got to be both. But again, that idea that our laws should be reflections of our values as a society, and so right now our laws are basically, we can slowly destroy nature, right? Because we'll regulate the harm. We'll allow so many parts per million of this poison and so many parts per million of this poison. And so it's really what it is. And we don't see it that way, but it's a slow destruction of nature because at regulated amounts. And so we're now living with the consequences of 50 years of that kind of environmental law. So, yeah.
Susan?
I'm always struck, and goes with what you were saying. I'm always struck, even if you get a law passed, it gets over and over tested, and especially if it's an inconvenient law, it gets over and over tested. And the people who go for making this law, they wear out in the process. We had certain laws to protect the the Kensico Reservoir, which 9 million people drink from, and yet and comes up and again and up and again, and George is working on that. Well, maybe we could just add this, or maybe we could just change this, or it's not going to affect this, or maybe we can build a little closer. And so you put a tremendous amount of effort into something, but you never really get a stable victory, let's put it that way. It's an ongoing effort.
Mm-hmm. Two things. One, I always tell people, I go, and that's a great point, Susan, because it's always like this moving target, right? And it's like, so this idea that we're not going to like win and then you go home and everything's fine. I mean, you have to constantly stay engaged. And the other thing I always say is you have to remember the people with the power. That's why I think it's so important to know it's a power shift. And that's what's important, because the people who have the power to make the laws have the power to change the laws too, to their benefit. So right now there's this, you know, powerful, I would say, elite minority, which is what we had way back at the beginning of the founding of the country too. And even before that with the monarchies, right? And they're the ones who have the power to control and shift what the laws are. And so that's what we see. So every time activists win some small victory, those who have the power to change the laws from within, they usually do to their benefit, right? And so that's why we can't ever give up. It's a constant struggle. We have to constantly be vigilant and out there. I always sometimes think like maybe we should have like a mandatory, like for people service that they do, right? To like community service, to be engaged in their community and protect it. But it's always that, again, that's why to me it's so important to change who gets to make the decisions in the community, and do the people have a way to override? Because currently we have people outside the community making decisions about your community and using it for their gain and benefit, whether it's as a resource colony or as a dumping ground for waste or whatever. But the people don't have any way really to have standing to get into court to say, no, wait a minute, you know, this isn't right. So that's the part of the system that I'm the most bothered by, I guess. And the other thing is the idea that we also we're really good at creating illusions, I guess, in the law. And so part of this is this idea we're so protected by these regulations, right? That really don't, we let exemptions be written by the people who be the, you know, benefit by those. They write the laws. We don't know who writes the laws. We think our legislators do, but they don't. And then the other thing is the jurisdictions we put up, right? Are false, like these false boundaries we put. And I even yesterday I was talking to a relative of mine, and she's like, well, we have better protections here. And I'm like, well, that's not really true, because she lives in a foreign country, and she said, you know, we have much stricter laws as far as, you know, GMOs or like what pesticides can be sprayed and things. And I go, yeah, but that border that you think is created between you and that country next to you, if their regulations are not as good as yours, it's a little like delusional to think that those pesticide, the spray isn't coming across the border, that the GMO seeds aren't blowing across the border. But we believe that. We're really good at convincing ourselves of that.
And I think in the United States, we have a really deep sense of trust in our government. So we think that everything is safe because that's what the government is for. George, I know you had your hand up, and then Sister Carol.
Well, I just find this very encouraging and very nourishing, and I really appreciate and it's making me think differently, even tactically. I know you mean it at a much deeper level, but it really helps, and it's already helping me with new ways to communicate. I think it's just wonderful, and I thank you.
Great, thank you. I hope it does. That's the whole point.
So can I just jump in a second here? So, and that is that I had heard a talk recently in which there was a young organizer talking about the rights of nature. And what he said is, you know, when we look at like women's suffrage, for example, or the civil rights movement or something, you know, you look at it after the fact and you think, okay, you know, they came with this, you know, we know they had to, we don't realize how long the movement was that led up to that. So you need to start putting that idea out there. It's a startling idea that trees and rivers should have legal rights. But if you don't start putting that idea out there and letting it, people, discuss it and think about it, you can't get to the end result. You can't. So, okay, Sister Carol.
And I'm conscious you're gonna have your meeting soon. So I'm gonna just say something that maybe you can talk about either at the meeting or at your next meeting. So first of all, I want to say thank you for letting us join in this conversation because, and I think the other board members would agree with me, it really enriches us as ROAR members to have conversations with our environmental colleagues in this level, because we are inspired by you and your commitment, and you know so much more about the issues that you help teach us so that we can be advocates. So I really see it, this mutual relationship as really key. One of the things that we've been invited into as we're members is to be part of a coalition that Tish, thank goodness, is still helping us organize, because New York State Assemblyman Patrick Burke, it's in committee. There's a lot of advocacy that's going to need, but there is that New York State Great Lakes Bill of Rights that's in committee. So this is what I'd like to propose, because after reading Ruth's very moving in the chat box, Ruth, I can feel for you. In terms of the trees and what you're being told, and Susan, what you were saying, because I know how you've been working with the water in Kensico Dam and trying, there's just so much for years and years. So my thought was, can we have a part 2 to this? And Tish, you who know a lot about the New York State Great Lakes Bill of Rights, how would that help? If it were to be passed, how would that help, for instance, Ruth and the people that she's working with in terms of this existing tree law, and that they're trying to preserve these old growth trees? How would it help maybe think about the water and the expansion of the airport in Armonk? How would maybe even, I know, again, I only know so little, Rockland County, I mean, I have just been impressed the way you have worked in terms of water and what you've done with the desalination, plant that, who knows, it might come up again, but you've done so much. How might some of the issues that our environmental colleagues in ROAR have been working on for such a long time, how might a New York State Great Lakes Bill of Rights help us and make it stronger for us as we work on these issues? So this is something that we're not going to answer now, but maybe we can do a part 2 where we have case studies from the very real situation that the environmental colleagues are working on. And then maybe you could share, Tish, saying if it were to come to pass, I don't know, it would have to be planned, but I'm just going to say, throw that out to the universe and see how that might, maybe come to be.
I mean, it's really interesting because New York, I mean, you guys are like, you have this great bill in the, that this legislator introduced. I mean, it's like this doesn't happen. I mean, this never happens where a legislator at the state level, because people at the local, we work a lot with local level community groups, and everybody will say a lot of times, they'll go, well, you're working at the wrong level. You need to go to the state level. So then when he wanted a Great Lakes Bill of Rights drafted, and it's so interesting because there isn't this great outpouring of support from people in New York because maybe they don't understand it, right? Like what we're talking about, it's a new concept. And so one, it would help immensely because a state passing it would be the first in the United States. And so that would get huge media attention. That alone would benefit, I think, local communities. But I can send around too, or I can have Peggy, she can send it to you, but the actual language that's in the Great Lakes Bill of Rights, because it has rights for the ecosystem, but it also has rights to a clean and healthy environment. And it says the people and the natural environment, including each ecosystem of the state of New York, shall possess the right to a clean and healthy environment, which includes the right to a clean and healthy Great Lakes. So, you know, it has other things in it, you know, right to be freedom of from toxic trespass. And that again talks about the people of the state of New York, as well as the Great Lakes ecosystem and watersheds. So even though it's written specifically as the Great Lakes Bill of Rights, we put language in that it would be broader than that on purpose. So anyway, so either way, I mean, it would just be huge to get the media attention, I think, and to use it as an educational tool, which is what we've been trying to do. But a lot of people aren't aware of it. And there's even environmental groups that are very resistant to it. So
I want to suggest, you know, now we're up to the last, I don't know what it is, like 2 weeks of the session, the legislative session in New York State. I think if I'm understanding correctly, it would need to be reintroduced next year. But maybe we can use that time until the next session, which isn't until January, from June 6th until January, whatever it is, to kind of, you know, meet with legislators, talk to them about it, kind of bring up what's beneficial, you know, kind of this is the time to maybe have more a follow-up conversation, as Sister Carol is suggesting, and then to try to organize a little bit around it about why it's so important. Does that make sense to people?
And I would say too, we have no illusion, right, that this is just going to get past it. I mean, it's right. It's not. I mean, that's not. And even if it goes through committee, it's going to get like totally reshaped, and it's going to not be what we wanted originally. But to use it as an educational tool, because even talking to people about it, people can't envision something unless you have it in hand, right? So this is also to provide an example for people of what this is what a law like this could look like.
Susan and then Anne.
I'll pass.
Okay.
No.
Anne? You sure?
Yeah, Peggy. You should, well, we should talk. You should use the water issues listserv as a forum for putting anything and everything that you do on it. I think you should be another co-chair, actually. So, I mean, we wouldn't be doing anything other than having that, you know, that status, so people would listen to what you're saying maybe more and getting this out there. So that's all.
Well, we should talk separately about that. I also just want to raise the issue of the sense of awe. You know, I think that's kind of like, you know, part and parcel of what Sister Carol was trying to get across, and certainly what I feel is that sense of connection with the natural world very often is, you have to have, as Aldo Leopold said, I think in the quote that somebody put up, some of those quotes were wonderful, Tish. I particularly love the one from the woman who had worked at the EPA. That was the one that I could really relate to as somebody who has worked for a long time on different kinds of battles, mostly on the water side. But if you can share your PowerPoint, that would be great. I'd love those quotes. But also the sense, you know, you can't care about something, you can't understand it and respect its need to thrive unless you love it. And I feel very often for the natural world that sense of connection with everything really is deeply rooted in a sense of awe. I don't know if other people relate to that, but it's just, I know, you know, Rachel Carson wrote about the sense of wonder, you know, just, you know, it's a kind, there's a spiritual side to this too. I'm trying to say, not just a legal side to it. I think it's both, you know.
I agree with you.
So,
and there's also, Peggy, I saw you put in chat a lot of the links I had sent you. And so you can watch some of those testimonies. I mean, Sister Carol's is very moving. Hers is on there. We broke them out separate, so you can pick and choose which ones you want to listen to. Andrea also made a documentary as part of her art exhibit, and the documentary film is titled "What We Do to Nature, We Do to Ourselves." So there's a trailer in that link too for that. but yeah, I mean, there's a lot of great resources and things. I agree with you, Peggy, that that's got to be that emotional connection, because that's what will allow us to take risks, right? I mean, that's why people during the suffrage movement, you know, the civil rights movement, the abolition movement, all those things, it was because they felt so deeply and had a connection, and they were willing to take risks. And I hate to say, I mean, you know, it's like, it's nice to educate and talk about all this stuff, but it's going to come down to, yeah, we're going to have to take risks. I mean, whether it's financial risks or whether it's, you know, bodily risks or whatever, because it's again about a power shift, and it's not going to come easily. They're not just going to one day wake up and go, oh yeah, you're right, we should be doing this. No, but I think we have a lot of power in numbers, right? The people, as we all start believing, like you're talking about the awesomeness, and that we believe deeply in what is right and what's a spiritual connection we have, that's what'll save it, I think, and save all of us in the process.
Wow. So maybe we should wrap up and let everybody go. Were there any other last comments or questions? Anything that I missed from the chat in terms of questions? Let's see. Okay, I apologize if I did miss it, but thank you so much, Tish and Sister Carol, for bringing this to our attention. I just want to mention that I'm going to stay on for anybody who wants to hear. I'll just talk quickly about some of the state legislation, and also about Rockland's water issues. Or we just wrapped up a case. We didn't wrap it up. A case just wrapped up for the Public Service Commission case on the Suez-Veolia water issue. So, Anne, if you want to hear a little bit of that, you might want to stay on for a few minutes. And any of the Rockland people who want to hear how that, what came out of that, maybe stay on
Yeah,
for a few minutes.
some 2017 water law. That was in the 20, so it's cool.
I just want to say thank you very much, Roar, as those of us from Roar, we really thank you very, very much for doing this, and hopefully we'll continue the discussion. I might listen. I'm going to turn off my camera because I also had meetings last night, and I'm going to stand and do some exercises, I think. Okay.
Yeah, and I want to thank you, Peggy, too, and you too, Carol. And yeah, anybody, if you have questions, feel free to email me. It's tish@celdef.org. Happy to answer questions.
Yeah, and Tish and Sister Carol, maybe we can reconnect and kind of figure out next steps. Where do we go?
Great.
Yeah.
Thank
you so much for everything.
Night.
Yeah. So I just want to quickly mention, first of all, some of the legislation that we've been following. New York Heat Act and Climate Superfund Act has not been passed, was not passed in the budget, and is still, you know, the legislature has only until June 6th before they wrap up. So I know they're asking for people to go to Albany on May 22nd to lobby, in particular Ken Zabrowski, yes, our assemblyman. Another way to go, you know, you can make calls to him. You can make calls to Carl Hasty, who may be the person who's really not bringing it to a vote. And the Climate Superfund Act, that's another one that seems like a no-brainer, make the polluters pay. So those are two things, you know, you can make one call, do both of them. Climate Superfund Act and the New York Heat Act, both really important climate legislation. For those who are in Rockland, I just want to mention the community solar campaign through the villages of Nyack and Upper Nyack, and that was a link I meant to put into the chat, but if you email me separately, I can send you the link to it. This is kind of a no-brainer. It's a way to support the development of new renewable energy projects and also to pay slightly less. So anybody who is not familiar with this already, please reach out to me and do it through the Nyack page, which, you know, maybe before we get off, I can put the probably not. I'll probably, if you're interested, just email me at Rockland Climate. That's the easy one to remember. Rockland Climate at Gmail. And I can send you the link to sign up for the Nyack and Upper Nyack. Even if you don't live in Nyack and Upper Nyack, you can still sign up. The last thing I just wanted to do, unless people had other things they wanted to bring up, Kathy, I know you wanted to bring up the Farm Bill. And just, I want to go quickly through what happened, the outcome of the rate case. So there was a rate case, what they call a rate case. Rate cases are really about policy as well, because it's about the rates which are going to, pay for the policies. So in the course of that, they're really talking about the policies as well. So I'm going to just go quickly through some of the things, and then I want to get to the really important outcome of the case, which was some of what we came to ourselves, what we kind of learned in this rate case. So this was one of the cases in which we were able to get more people to participate, in particular from the Rockland Water Coalition, and they became parties on the case. We got the public to comment. But the people from the Rockland Water Coalition really hung in with it. There's a small group of us all the way through to the end of the rate case. God help us, a ton of work. And we participated in negotiations, etc. So there were some things we got. We got more in this case than we had gotten for years as a result of that dogged participation. And there was a lot that we didn't get. So one of the issues, I won't spend a lot of time on it, just going quickly. So we had asked for climate, mitigation and adaptation. In other words, what can Veolia, which used to be Suez, is now Veolia, what can they do to reduce their emissions? And we had asked them to look at that, including making sure that that'll be a calculation that they'll make about any new supply sources, such as desalination, which is extremely energy intensive. And also, what is the impact going to be of climate change on our water supply? We have limits on our water supply is already stressed. So what's going to be the impact of climate change? Yes, we know in general, we've gotten a lot more water, at least in particular this year, but keep in mind also the summer of 2022, where it was extremely hot. There was a period of just prolonged, I don't know, it was weeks and weeks in the 90s and practically no rain. And any rain that fell was just immediately evaporated. That could be a very typical summer. There are so many different kinds of impacts. And apparently there is the threat of longer droughts at the same time as you get extreme precipitation that runs off and doesn't have time to soak in. There's something called flash droughts. There's impacts on water quality, such as on the algal blooms, that kind of thing. I could keep going on and on and on. So what we did get was we got that they were required to create greenhouse gas inventory and climate mitigation plan, but they're not required to come back with that until 2028. Implementation won't be until 2029. So discouraging, but okay, it's better than nothing. In terms of climate vulnerability, they just continue to say we have no problem. We don't need to do a vulnerability assessment. We did get something they agreed to file some comments in their testimony about vulnerability, climate vulnerability assessment, and what they plan to do to address that. So not what we wanted on either case, but we did get something. PFAS costs, as you all know, there's PFAS chemicals in nearly all of, really you could say all of Rockland's drinking water. There is public funding available, even for private utilities on the federal level, not on the state level, but on the federal level. And the company had no plan. They had not really looked into it. They had no plans to file for it. DPS didn't seem to be even aware of it. And I see you raising your eyebrows. Let's talk about this separately. Yeah, it's really one of those. And we had to battle to get them to do anything. So what they came up with is that they have a reporting requirement, that they have to report annually about what efforts they have made to, this could be nothing more than just a very perfunctory thing that's filed away. And unless DPS educates themselves about this, it's useless because DPS won't know what they should be doing, in other words, and what the potential is out there. For those of us who live in Rockland, I would say that's it for what we got on the what we got side of it. There was consolidation of rates with other smaller communities upstate. Susan, I see one second. All right, Susan, what was your question? Go ahead.
Yeah, I just want to throw out, because it's never come, what I haven't been active at all in this, but I was appalled that they fix 1% of their leaks a year. And I wonder if even if you change that number to 5%, whether that would.
No, good point. Good point. Keep in mind that it's very expensive to repair leaks. This is an infrastructure repair. They profit from it just as they profit from desalination and wastewater reuse. If they bring either of those in, they'll make out like bandits. They also profit, by the way, from PFAS. That's one reason why they don't want to look for federal funding, because they make so much money from the infrastructure. But having said that, so yes, one of the things that, another one that I forgot and I left out of this list is the leak repair maintenance, getting some kind of standard. When in 2014, they said their leak rate was 24%. It's a little more complicated than that, but just let's ballpark it, 24%. So almost 1/4 of their water that was unaccounted for. And now it's at close to 22%, which is 10 years later. It's like, what, we've paid tens of millions of dollars to them to set up different kinds of systems. And the idea was supposed to be that this would dramatically reduce the leak rate. And it hasn't. Like, a good leak rate is considered to be between 15, industry standard, I think, is considered to be between 15 and 18%. So we're a long way from that. So shouldn't there be some kind of penalty if they're not doing a more effective job of it? So this kind of brings me to, so the conservation plan was not, they refused to strengthen it. They basically said, well, the company hasn't come back with a need for a major new water supply source, which when they do, believe me, it'll be much too late. It's kind of the metaphor I keep using is it's like saying that there's no stress test needed for the Tappan Zee Bridge because the bridge hasn't collapsed yet. I mean, it's self-evident that it's a ridiculous way metric to use. And so there were a number of other things that they just refused to even look at. And that brings me to sort of the biggest takeaway from this case. And here, I hope everybody is listening closely, no matter whether you live in Rockland or not. And I'm looking in particular at you, but Lower Hudson Group people too. And that is really that we started asking, why is it that since 2014, when we had the big win where we killed the desalination project, we haven't gotten even a comma changed? Nothing. We've gotten nothing. Bupkis, as they say. Despite the fact that we've hired experts. Thank you to Sierra Club and to George for all the fundraising that we did. I didn't even ask for money this time because it had no effect. We have filed expert comments. We've had experts testify. The county, way back when, hired an expert also. Why has it had no effect? And so we began trying as much as possible to look under the hood. And we asked very aggressive interrogatory questions. We had conversations with DPS staff before the case began. And we also went through the case and looked at the qualifications of the people who are making technical decisions on what is technical water policy. These are really subspecialties within water policy. So somebody who does watershed planning, like one of our experts, Professor Dan Van Abs, who is the head of watershed protection for the state of New Jersey, That's what he does. Watershed. Yes, he knows about water conservation, but he's not a water conservation expert. And if you really want to know about water conservation, he's going to say, you need to speak to somebody who has expertise in that. And a water conservation expert is not going to want to speak to water conservation rates because that's not what they do. These are all subspecialties. Just as there is, there are doctors, a neurosurgeon isn't going to want to weigh in on a dental problem and the other way around. These are subspecialties. Well, guess what? There wasn't one person on this case, and the trial staff in this case, who had any specialized water expertise. The closest that it came to it was somebody who had a BA, I think I've got that right, in environmental engineering, a BA. That's a BA, and that's in environmental engineering in general. So I'm not saying he's a stupid person, but I'm just saying you really need people with expertise. And then we started kind of more aggressively asking about this, very close relationship that we've been aware of for a long time, so basically what we came to is that the staff is really relying on the expertise of the company because they don't have it themselves. And of course, the commissioners are relying on the staff for their recommendation because they also don't have it. And there is no commissioner who has water expertise and never has been within the time that I've been looking at the PSC. And so we've come up with a series of recommendations. We've approached our assemblymen about maybe holding public hearings, having an audit done of the PSC and the DPS. And there are other organizations who are interested in jumping in also. And yes, I am talking to Sierra Club about this. And we should have a conversation separately about this, but it's just, we're really trying to, we stopped being polite. We were told by some of the organizations we were working with very closely in previous cases, don't push back too hard on DPS because you want to have a good, positive working relationship with them. And in this the case, we kind of said, what do we have to lose? We're not getting a comma changed. So let's go for broke. Let's, sue me. What do you, I don't have a career that I'm trying to protect, and, that it's not. So that's where we're going with it next, is to try to kind of take a closer look at DPS and the PSC and what's wrong there. Why? And okay, big part that I left out is that by involving others, we began to hear, and we were invited into, two of us were invited into a group of sort of an informal group of groups, not NGOs, that also have cases before the PSC and are just as frustrated as we are, and are thinking about not participating anymore in rate cases because, like us, they're saying, what's the point? We're not getting anything. So, that's it may be a slightly different experience in cases proceedings like citing proceedings that the PSC holds. But I've heard the same about the climate gas planning proceedings. They're not exactly rate cases, but apparently they hired, which is very rare. The DPS hired an expert, an independent expert, and NRDC, Sierra Club, Environmental Defense Fund, Earth Justice, they all hired experts also. And all of that was pretty much almost completely ignored. So the same experience that we had. And the gas utilities, at least so far, have been pretty much told to proceed as they had planned. So I don't know if there's any questions or comments about that.
Well, just what I think is that you have a water system that is so remote, that doesn't give a damn about your area at all. It has nothing to do with your area. And so they're wanting to make money on the least amount of effort and the most profit.
The highest profit items, which is infrastructure items. Yes, and what comes out of that is also like privatized water systems are a really bad idea.
Yes.
I mean, people privatize because they think, oh, we're going to bring in all this expertise, and it's just it's a two-edged sword.
Yeah.
Because they have the interests of their shareholders at heart, and that's why the company jumped first when there were some water issues. The first thing that they jumped to was desalination, which is the most energy intensive, the most environmentally harmful, the most expensive,
most profitable.
And the most profitable. Yep.
Yeah, and I love the fact that their pilot plant is state of the art until it floated off, and then it was just we put together. I, I've always thought that was a very
Thank you for reminding me of that, Susan.
until it
You
just.
made my evening.
Oh well, we really didn't make that too strong. It just floated off. Imagine if you had been completely dependent on that.
Exactly. Like, was that a great idea? Cite this major water source in the river? It's like
Well, I have an intimate feeling with that plant because I've been working on Indian Point issues and pollution for so long, and I'm just thinking, oh my God, you don't want to put water plant in the Hudson.
in the plume of the pollution from the the leak from Indian Point,
Yeah.
that the groundwater is plume moved into, and then it's actually, it would have been in the plume from that.
Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah. So,
Sister
okay.
Sister Carol?
I just wanted to say something, and I am not involved in what you were just talking about and have, so little knowledge of it, but I just wanted to throw in this little thought because I have yet to understand what it really means, but I was listening to On Being, Krista Tippett's On Being, and this Butler, I'm forgetting her first name, and that's the one who spoke this past week, but excellent, very inspiring woman down in New Orleans. But energy democracy, I couldn't help but think about what you were just talking about now, and how she is into, among many other things, energy democracy. And it is about how do we get into the hands of the people, our electricity, our water, all these utilities that are making a profit from us. But I just wanted to say that because there must be people out there that can,
Yeah, there are really capable people that could be hired,
You're running against our who pays for our political people. You run it's just nasty.
and regulatory
Contract.
regulatory capture.
Yes, I
And
know.
people from the DPS have gone to work for Veolia.
I know. Anyway,
And something that I said earlier, I don't know if
Go
I'm,
ahead, Lori.
can you hear me, Peg? Something that we said earlier, Peg, is that people basically trust our government still. And in this case, on the Public Service Commission case, what Peg just described, when we found out that there was virtually no water expertise, and this has been going on for years. I mean, we got saddled with a desalination plant. We knew back then that there was no expertise, but we didn't know like how extremely true that was. And if you want to know who is that staff, they're pretty much borrowed from energy, from the power companies, and from telecom, and put on our cases. And so they're saying there's not enough private water, or public water systems. The balance. There's so few of these privately owned in New York State that they just haven't really, teed up for it. But in one of the hearings, we declared that it is a form of regulatory malpractice. Like if that was medicine, that's what I said. If this was medicine, you all know that, this wouldn't be okay to see one doctor for another. And so we're sitting with this, trying to figure out, how does this matter to, who does this matter to? Those of us on this Zoom, yes, but that's really a question for the overview is, like, who does it matter to? Are people so disconnected from the process of governance and participation? Are we able to get people to care? It's a really big factor because we can't,
Silent.
Yeah, Lori, we lost your volume. Lori, can you, Lori, can you hear me?
maybe, sorry, my volume's missing.
No,
Thanks,
now
Amy.
it's back on.
Oh, yeah. The question is where to go with this appalling fact. And we're thinking going to the comptroller's office or, I mean, maybe there is an awakening moment, but it's so extreme. And as Ted was saying, people in other sectors of the utility are finding this too. But there
So I
has to be, that's all I wanted to say really, was to give you a little bit more background on who is regulating. Just pulled off of energy and public.
So the problem is that
So
PS
it's kind of like sci-fi, actually. Thanks.
So the PSC has a really key role in the implementation of the Climate Act or the CLCPA. And so if they're not going to help get us there, if they're not going to play a really active role, then it's a really huge problem. It goes way beyond Rockland's water issues. And so I think that's going to get the attention of the legislators, I hope, because that is such a big problem. And apparently they are not, they've actually said that rate cases, that the CLCPA does not apply to rate cases. Well, but everything that I was just telling you about what we got and what we didn't get, I didn't even mention rates. The rate cases are about policy also. It's the rates are paying for the policy. So in other words, they're exempting a huge part of what they do from the CLCPA. So something needs to be changed. They need a more direct mandate. I don't know. I'm not even, we made quite a few suggestions, but there's hopefully we're going to get the legislative hearings maybe this summer, and we're going to hopefully, well, to be continued. I don't know yet, and hopefully we're going to get at least a conversation with a controller or his key people, the appropriate people. Any other suggestions, comments? And then I know we have one other person, Kathy, wanted to speak about the Farm Bill. Any other suggestions or comments on this? Okay. Lower Hudson Group people, I hope I can talk about it briefly. I don't want to bore you, but at the next Lower Hudson Group meeting. Kathy, did you want to unmute and speak about the Farm Bill?
Just very, very briefly, we're just talking about water, and I'm talking about food. What are the essentials in life, right? And you're talking about our water company being a international profit-making corporation, and our food supply is also in the hands of a good number of but monopolized food corporations. And that's the issue with this national legislation, which is called the Farm Bill. I'm not going to go into a lot of detail about it because it's extremely complicated. And I also have spoken about it in this group before. But it affects everything we put in our mouths. And all of our sustenance to life, including water. I mean, and water is connected to it too, of course. And our current system is unsustainable, and if you're wondering why the cost of food is going up, you know, there are many reasons why, but one of them is that we have not done anything to adapt to the changing climate, to droughts, to floods, and this affects our agricultural system. So in any case, I don't want to go, you know, it's 8:45, and I won't go into too much detail about it. Sierra Club Atlantic chapter has put together a very good handout, and I will send that to Peggy, and she can send that around to people with ideas for contacting our reps. Senator Gillibrand sits on the Agriculture Committee in Washington. She is making decisions right now about the sustainability of our food system and the cost of food. So, you know, the legislation funds the Department of Agriculture, and Congress determines where the money that they're providing to the Department of Agriculture gets spent. And, you know, they designate it. And so these questions are in their hands right now in the House Ag Committee and in the Senate Ag Committee. And they have to then come together, reconcile their differences, and then everybody in Congress votes on it. So I have lobbied Gillibrand. She's the most important person right now. I lobbied Lawler a couple of weeks ago. But they need, you know, he's not on the Ag Committee, so he's not making these decisions. He will vote on the ultimate legislation. If anybody's in Molinaro's district, he's the only rep in New York State who is on the Ag Committee making the real decisions. And of course, we also know that the Republicans are in charge of the House, the Democrats are in charge of the Senate, and you know, what comes of it in the end, who knows? The other component of this bill, the biggest component, is food stamps, and you know, that's as far as I'm concerned, you know, the cost of food goes up, right? Don't people who need food stamps need more? The Republicans want to cut that by $28 million, okay? Or $1 billion, sorry. But my point environmentally is that if we don't change the system and how we grow our food and how we create our food and break some of those monopolies, those corporations, if we don't make these changes, the cost of food is just going to continue to go up and up and up. We're not adapting in any way to the changing climate, the droughts, the floods, etc. Nor are we adapting to you know, viruses that are affecting, like bird flu, which you can follow that back and attribute at least some of it to the changing climate also, the temperatures going up. So anyway, it's important to at least reach out to, especially Gillibrand right now, and all of our reps about their votes for this. And
So
I will send this flyer to Peggy, and she can send
okay, if you can, don't just send a flyer, put it in the body of the email, and then I can forward it to everybody.
Oh, okay.
Okay, whatever you want, have it in the body of the email. Okay.
Yeah.
Okay.
If it has to be, okay. No, not an attachment.
No, not, I mean, you can have an attachment, but put it in the body of the email. Whatever it is you want people to do. So, and then I can, not just, otherwise I've got to write an email, cover email, etc. So it just makes it so much, my life so much easier if you can just,
Oh, okay, but it,
yeah,
but.
yeah. People aren't going to open the attachment unless there's
Okay,
something in the body of the email that tells them what it is.
okay.
So put that in. So anybody else, anything? I know it's late. Any comments, complaints?
No, I have another call at 9.
Oh
We'll
my
go till
goodness.
about 11.
God bless you. Oh my goodness. That goes
And I
even,
was on one
even beyond
sisters.
my
I
capacity.
was on the 6 before this for my sister's assembly campaign.
Wow,
So my
wow,
husband
wow,
was like,
wow, wow,
"Yeah."
wow.
Well,
All
I'm gonna
right,
just
thank
say
you.
goodbye. Thank you, and we will be in touch. And I live
Okay.
in Buffalo now. I moved here.
Okay.
So Ellen Banks is moving down there.
Yes,
So
I
you'll
heard
have
that.
another.
I heard. Where is she moving to?
I don't know. I don't.
Fascinating.
I don't.
Awesome.
She's looking.
Oh, great. Okay.
Did you find a place?
Yes.
So, oh, good. Okay. All right. Good
Great.
night, everyone.
Okay. Good night,
Thank
everybody.
you.
Thank you. Okay. Okay.
Peggy.
Susan, so good to see you, I have to say.
Yeah,
I haven't seen you in so long. You doing okay?
on and off.
Okay. 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 Yeah, I was so, when you said the thing about that they wear you out, I was so thinking to myself, wow, that just pinned it, that just nailed it for me. It just, they do wear you out. You know, the corporations, etc. It's just like you keep fighting and
You
at a
keep
certain
fighting and you
point,
just,
you-
you go round and round and round. Even if you win, you end up,
the
yeah.
battle, but not necessarily the war.
yeah.
Yeah. Yeah, no, there's some saying, I don't know, that was said much more pithily than I can say it, but something like that. With environmental victories, they're never permanent, you know.
Yep.
So you find yourself
True.
fighting the same battle a few years later.
Same over and over and over and
Yeah,
over.
I
and
know.
over and
Look
over.
at
Yeah.
what we're going through with fracking, and now they're
They're
finding a
doing
way to
fracking again,
again. Yeah, it's just like, ugh.
coming up again. Yeah,
Like, what
I
part
see
of this
that.
do you guys not get? You know, I mean, it's
Yeah,
like,
well,
yeah.
okay,
All right, talk to you
good
soon.
seeing
Okay,
you.
okay, really
Very
good to see you.
seeing you.
Okay, okay,
Good
all right.
program.
Okay,
Thank you,
thank you.
Judy.
Okay, bye.